这是什么东东 ？YT 怎么一直出事？这样还想要跟人家竞争，还想要跟退去吃那块饼？他现在这样怎么比得赢？不给编辑耶！手上超惨，我没办法，手厨一条龙全部进去了，再加原本囤的，再加2、3单，啊，就这样啊，运气差没办法。就现在这个标题是 YouTube 那边标题改不了，是不是？靠背，我觉得 YouTube 标题是开抽白痴哦，他那个 YouTube 在干嘛？又不能改。要开抽哦，没得抽啦。只是他那个 YouTube 在耍白痴了，改不了YouTube 在告诉你怎么做，靠背。好啦，你看 YouTube 那边的自己知道就好了。我们等一下看那个，看这个访谈的这个 B 站那边小象这个他都有在做访谈的中文字幕啊，我觉得很不错。封面的妹子是哪个游戏？你说这个吗？这是花火啊，热子人啊。你最近网络上都看人家说我们是欢愉的热子人，就是这个花火啊。过滤器哪边载？这个月才加入那个订阅户专区啊，Discord 里面啊，你 Discord 加进来之后，连接你的账户，机器人会给你身份，然后订阅户专区这边的右上角就点选内容，就有过滤器音效。最近有增加了斯高伊跟 Unbelievable 的音效啊，如果有很需要的，好不好？想要刷图一直斯高伊的，可以来加入会员下载这个音效。好，在看访谈之前，我先去棒溜。刚看调酒看太多了，想尿尿了。回来啦，你还在努力调酒，我刚调完了。你的电脑死机了吗？没有，是我按暂停。我刚去上厕所啊，刚铁道才刚解完任务。 要干嘛？一堆人都准备要半夜开玩了，是不是？哎，那画面的没去。哦，NK 可以下载 ，NK 是啥？下一季打王跟刷图哪个比较赚钱？你现在是要我寄钱通灵吗？又没改版，我怎么知道？圣甲虫掉率不清楚，打王好不好掉不清楚，什么都不清楚，要怎么知道比较赚钱？感谢瘦不下飞还是我续订15个月。你要早睡，明天准时拓荒。你说明天是凌晨3点吗？因为 Think 有3.24的吗？怎么？再等一下吧。那可能晚点，因为这次改比较多东西，他可能还没弄好吧。我们也不知道。顺便跟各位讲一件事，今天看那个雕像 Discord 讲才知道，乐酷科技在台湾，现在繁中版Steam不是乐酷科技吗？明天国际是3点啊，就等一下，等一下就要改了。你不觉得今天那些什么老 P 还是谁，他们都不见了，就睡觉了啊？我刚刚讲那个乐酷科技那个啊，他们连官方的网站资料要公布，都要经过，都是 GGG 放的、都是原厂放的、真的，他真的在台湾就是完全的套皮真的是完全就是 GGG 在经营好扯哦。乐酷科技就只有找一个 FB 小编而已，然后还有行销举办活动，就这样啊。这个哦，还有一个就是再次强调，那个讨厌玩中资游戏的人啊，请赶快速速离开啊，不然你会越来越难过。当你发现真相的时候，像是一堆人不是说他打死绝不玩中资游戏，台服变成乐酷科技了，完蛋了，不能玩了，已经变中资了，不玩了。这个礼拜，那个腾讯那边宣布，GGG 股份掌握100%。啊，现在 GGG 股份100% 都是腾讯啊。哦，自己在意的小心一点啊。
Mark. And first thing, we're going to be talking about Path of Exile 1 questions. As I know that's the content that you'll be getting your hands on soon and want to hear all about. And then afterwards, we'll follow up with a bit of a deep dive into Path of Exile 2 reveals, both from today and also some of the other stuff that came up during the recent hands-on event. But good morning, Jonathan and Mark. How are you going?
Hey, really nice to be here again.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having us.
Always a pleasure. I love talking to you folks about some Path of Exile, right? So let's kick things off with the new league, Necropolis. And I just want to ask, should I ask about Lycia and Katarina and what it means for them to be involved, especially since they're like characters that are actively present elsewhere in the game? Right now. Like, what does that mean?
We bent the rules a little bit on that teaser. They're not actually involved. They're only in the sense that
能
they
放
are
预告片
both,
根本就没有关系。
T17 map bosses, so you don't actually fight them together, but we thought it would make a cool, little teaser shot there, and I think it did. It raised a lot.
等一下，魔幻天雷猪猪大概什么时候才能转用圣宗？你是要玩图腾吗？你是要图腾吗？你知道玩静止型的那个天雷猪猪图腾吗？宕机很猛的那个吗？如果是的话，赶快想别的吧。那个被砍了呢，它已经完全不能运作了。
A lot of questions, so
yeah.
它是少数被修正完全不能玩的。
I was like, we're just doing some timing stuff. Oh, they both kind of like deal with death, so there's a bit of a connection there.
Like when you get into maps, everything's all memories and the line gets a bit blurred. You can kind of do whatever you want, which is a good thing about that system. You don't have to stay so grounded and sensible. But so yeah, we do have some interesting
魔幻不知道玩什么，是猪猪不能放在图腾上面，然后魔幻有改，有一些新的限制，好像有些是不能用的，对不对？然后魔幻其实改了一个很强的东西，以前魔幻是看会看你的魔量，现有魔量去附加那个伤害，现在改了一个叙述，我觉得魔幻起飞，你知道吗？他现在不管每一次释放都是用最大魔力去计算，就不管怎样都是最大魔力在计算，所以应该是蛮 OK 的。那至于用去玩什么技能，你可能自己再看一下吧，看要套到哪边去，我觉得都可以套啊。很多技能其实应该都行。
There that are a bit different, but you know, it's again the maps allow us to, you know.
爱田翻译克里斯语速太快 ，Make 喜欢嘟囔。
It's again the maps allow us to kind of detach from the groundedness of the world and the rules of what's actually happening in there.
It looks like there's a lot of boss stuff coming this league. Is that all focused in the new T17 maps, or is there some with the league mechanic itself as well?
No, we focused the monster development this time round on the T17s instead of the league. So there's no new bosses in the league, but there are some reuse of monsters through like the All Flame Embers and whatnot, but not bosses. And then we put all our boss development towards creating these T17 bosses as well as the monsters. Like, there are quite a lot of actual interesting monsters in the T17 maps as well.
天雷他刚刚是说套用在他玩禁止天雷，套用到图腾那个不能玩了。
As just a monster. Like he's not a boss.
然后变异版也是啊。
Of Brutuses and you know various
I believe.
17图有典狱长大家族。新元打可以套皮之前闪电剑吗？你还要看之后的资料，因为现在新的元打不知道他吃不吃等级啊，等级不知道有没有吃很多。
Like the non-notable ones, which will be quite interesting to see. You'll probably find a rare hasted Brutus is a whole different level compared to. Interesting to see.
I believe
throughout like the non-notable ones, which will be quite.
很期待，很有趣的
Interesting to see.
精怪带迅捷的典狱长。
We find a rare hasted Brutus is a whole different level compared to even the Brutus map boss and whatnot. So.
Yes, we experienced that last league in Affliction at launch. For those of us there who empowered that boss, that was an experience to be sure. So we'll kind of change my order of the day then with the tier 17 maps. So there's 4 of these, was there?
We've got 5 of them. Yeah, we got the
不就万圣之地，比万圣之地的强哦。
Fortress map, Abomination map.
第17图是有特殊词缀的、哦，什么光环减 90% 效果什么的很多啊。
Uber maps, but we kind of also had Uber maps last league in a different way with the community made maps as well. But this is a whole different system, right?
Yeah, this is different. Obviously the Valdo's maps come with a little bit more craziness going on. There are custom mod pools on these. And there is a little bit of overlap, but nowhere near as crazy. Like you're not going to roll the like mod that sends you to the Void League or anything like that. That's exclusive for those player-made ones. But yes, this is a new tier of difficulty. It is expected that they are hard for sure, but I'm sure some of your questions get into some of that. So
yeah,
you know,
sure.
Explain them as it comes.
So this is these
我们现在看 QA， 因为我没有看啊。
Now for getting like the Uber fight keys. What led to the decision to make them
还没看过他有，我就看一下。
map thing like this instead of from the boss, which I guess was the more expected, like you would get an Uber Maven key from Maven.
Like okay, like let's say it was from Shaper, and to get Uber Shaper, and you kill your Shaper. Let's say it was even once every time, and now you kill your Uber Shaper, or let's say you fail, that's fine, but eventually you conquer it, you can kill it. It's not now fun to go back and do regular Shaper where clearly you can do the Uber version. Why are you bothering with the non-Uber version? So unless you want a specific drop from him, it's not fun to go back and just do like a clearly lower grade quality. So we instead went with it going a different way, where we have something that is ideally in between those 2 points of difficulty and has random variance. Like, you'll find that some of the tier 17 map bosses with certain mod combinations are probably even harder than the Uber pin.
T17不是说介于 Uber 之间吗？他还说可能比 Uber 还难欸。那可是 Uber 碎片不是要打 T17才会掉吗？这逻辑是，当你可以打强的，你不会想去打普通的。但是我们的门票是共用的，我可以直接用鱼图天赋选择我要打500还是一般的，不是吗？那现在变成你要打了，现在变成你一定要先去打 T17，然后去收集碎片，我才可以开 Uber。而且 T17可能还比 Uber 难。你要打 Uber 之前，你要先打过 T17。
Pinnacles, depending on your character and
它词缀有很多条啊，我觉得很容易抽到不好打的。
Entirely consistently, like it'll be occasionally the case, but it certainly isn't fun to just be like, in order to do Uber Shaper, I have to do this content that I have clearly proven capable of doing, and just repeating that over and over.
你说无法偷取那个无法偷取，我觉得还算小事，你知道吗？如果你要 T17新的词缀有什么？像什么陷阱跟地雷丢出去会少1发的，然后什么光环效果减90%，都这种很恶心的词哎。
I see, yeah. So it's for the people who want to farm their own ones. They're doing content that is up to their challenge level, basically, because the regular boss wouldn't be anywhere near that.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Right on. How do you get the tier 17 maps, though?
So the tier 17 maps, when you get more void stones, it has a chance to convert T16 maps that drop. The more void stones you get, it becomes multiplicatively higher. But there is a kind of diminishing returns on that. So it is quite probable to convert T16 maps like the first one, and then as you get more T17s, it becomes less and less and less. And the reason we did that is obviously the discrepancy between just running regular T16s and obviously top tier juicing. You end up with, like, you know, the multiplier difference of the amount of T16s dropping is substantial, to say the least. And we didn't want it to be that we have to balance around the juicing with respect to getting T17s. We wanted to be that more accessible across the board. And so yes, we added a kind of diminishing return. So like your first one might be quite probable, the next one's less, and the next one less, and then you're not going to get like 20 T17s in one map kind of thing going on.
Right.
It is also worth noting T17s cannot drop T17s. They are not self-sustaining. The intention is that you are still kind of doing T16s and occasionally diving into T17s, unless you want to trade, of course, in which case, you know, the world's your oyster.
So I saw they have their own new
当然，
mod
嘣嘣是什么声音？
and we saw things. One of the mods I saw was
这个小象的东西是
life, mana, and ES on hit. The mana removed on hit seems to break a lot of builds in particular whenever that sort of thing comes up, as mana is generally a pretty finely tuned system in Path of Exile. And it gets me thinking in general about mods like 80% reduced recovery and things that disable auras and stuff like that. And it feels just a bit not too dissimilar to monsters just being immune to your build, right? So what's the intention behind those sorts of modifiers in maps?
It certainly was the ideal dream back when, that there are a lot of modifiers that can't be done by every build and you'd re-roll them and whatnot. Now, obviously, in the context of T17s, you can't re-roll them. So this really is, you should either change your playstyle, take your time, be a bit more careful to do it, or you can trade it away, of course, or maybe you simply can't run it on that character and you have to maybe build a different character that is capable of or more characters that are capable of doing different maps. There is one tool, though, that is in the form of a scarab. One of the scarabs gives you additional crafting modifiers on your map device. It isn't a common scarab by any means, so you can't just use it on every T17. But two of the extra crafting mods that get applied to the map device is that prefixes are disabled and suffixes are disabled.
感谢皮蛋瘦肉粥续订9个
So
月。
if you do get one of these T17s, I do expect sometimes
我在之恋会很贵吗？不知道，没玩过，没注
you
意
can at，least
但它
use
不
that
好掉
scarab。to turn that off occasionally. So it is like one of the tools that you can use to
有玩游戏的工
get
程师。
around certain mods that it might be too hard or you can't quite get through. But the general idea is that you do have to actually think about these modifiers, play around them, change your characters. It's not just a kind of like.
至少我是觉得全部都改成变用圣甲虫，我觉得还行。
Mindless go in there and do it, unless of course your build is so strong and so diverse that it can do that, which that's fine. If you want to build your character that way, then that's what the game allows you to do, and that's what we like. So.
Right on. We'll jump back to the league a little bit before we move on to some of the other game questions that I have. But what you're doing with the difficulty control for Necropolis, where you can select which monsters get buffed in which ways, seems like a lot of what people have been asking for, especially with Affliction's launch, where we didn't have as precise control over the difficulty of content we were facing. That said, how do you weigh up giving this level of control against things like adding to the time it takes to jump into the gameplay? I saw that this is going to take a bit of time to like read through those things and shuffle the menu each zone.
So obviously we like giving control. But yes, in this league you cannot skip the difficulty.
哇，跳过选择界面。
Having the control is a way to make it easier or harder if you want. But you cannot skip it. If you just enter the area and you don't interact with the lantern, you'll get whatever randomly generates. So you don't have to, I'd say throughout the campaign, like it is going to be harder by not engaging with it, but you don't have to engage with the league in the sense of interacting with that UI. But you will have to deal with the fact that some monsters are harder.
所以它预设是怪物都会比较强啊，你要去调整才会变比较弱，然后你没办法跳过它，你每次进去就是要。哦，起来有个天赋大点能跳，你说右下角那个吗？
Now that being said, yes, obviously we like difficulty, being able to manipulate the difficulty, and I think it is, and obviously the rewards as well. Now it just needs to be the case that it is worth your time from a reward standpoint, engaging with that. If that isn't the case, we have failed. Like it obviously should be worth your time from a reward point to go, oh, awesome, I got this thing, you put on, some XP, I need to put on this pack, or you get like, the pack spawns Torment Spirits on death, I need to make sure it's on this pack. Like, there are certainly lots of positive mods that, or like spawning lesser shrines, right? If you put that on a very rare pack, you're not going to get very many of them. If you put it on a common pack, all of a sudden you're going to have a whole bunch of shrine buffs throughout the area, which in turn also makes it easier. So not only does this league make it harder,
感谢我家的马桶刷续订14个月。
Now one thing you said talking about the time, obviously
我最简单就用火灵大哥先拓荒吧，然后之后住迷宫，然后看抽到什么技能再练。
But because we have added the nodes on the Atlas tree for Necropolis, we have added a keystone that allows you to. Well, effectively what it says is the mods are applied randomly and there are more mods. So it is harder and it is more rewarding in some senses, but you then don't get to customize it. But if someone is like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with interacting with that between my maps, you can just run the map and it will randomly do it.
剧情机制有连续性跟刷图不同。
necessarily to say that that's better or worse. It's just one of the ways someone can customize their experience here. But yeah, so through the campaign, you don't have to use the UI, but it will probably be harder and less rewarding. So you should be wanting to do it, unless, of course, you just want to get to endgame, go for it. And at endgame, if you want to invest in the keystone, you can skip doing it on the maps themselves if you, again, don't want to have to deal with it. So ideally, we've given
大地挑战还蛮特别的，
here to do both versions and play the way you want to play.
人家长得很像那个什么，好像在哪边看过那个挑战奖励，好像在哪边看过，忘记了。
That league experience now, to the point that I'm surprised it hasn't happened before, right? But it makes sense.
Actually, we were talking about trying to find a way, and we were talking about like check boxes and all that, and it's all just a little bit inelegant. And it was actually a suggestion of one of the programmers was like we could do a keystone, and then we're like, hey, we never actually do tree support for the current league. Like it's just not even a thing that we've really considered. And from there, we're like,
说好看有说丑，我觉得还不错啊，算有特色。
It's going to be fun and allow people to do different strategies, and like, why not? So I think it is a good addition. We'll see how it actually plays, because it's the first time we're doing it, and then we may continue doing it for future leagues, or maybe it was just it's terrible. We'll see, and we'll not do it again. Well, who knows? I mean, we think it's cool here, but we're not always right.
All right. So in the campaign, the monsters you kill in one zone affect what happens in the next zone, like the amount of devoted monsters, modifiers that show up. And this is the first time I recall seeing a league like this where what you do in one affects like kind of the next zone like that. Does it work on like any next zone you enter, even like a zone reset of the same zone or somewhere in a different act or something?
No. So this doesn't. the league actually isn't customizable when accessing through waypoint through the world map.
Oh.
Which is bit different. I mean, you might think, oh, but my blood aqueduct farming, and yeah, sure, you can still do it technically by farming from town, but we're also like, you know, not that I know how many people even still do that outside of like, you know, SSF tabular farming, which I still don't even know if necessarily is a strategy. But either way, yes, farming the same zone over and over is not really embraced in this league. The difficulty will still be there, but you won't be able to customize.
明天 POE 怎么更
and
新？
you
直接更新
won't
哦
get。devoted mods either.
打开游戏它就更新
So
啦。
linear playthrough when you're going through. So
铁道啊，不是铁道，流亡暗道启动。
yeah, the way it works
Oh.
effectively is like the more haunted monsters you kill, the more likely you will get
讲错
devoted
啦。
modifiers. It's a campaign only feature. It
流亡
doesn't
暗
happen
道
on maps.
不是
Maps
铁
are
道。
completely randomly generated per item.
Ah.
So it's an interesting way where it works a little bit differently in the campaign than maps, which I think is interesting. I kind of like having subtle differences there. And yeah, the more haunted monsters you kill, the more likely you are to get devoted monsters. And this is actually a reward for why you want to make it hard. Because if, let's just using mudflats as the example, if you put all the hard if you have say 2 out of 4 of the packs, or however many packs there are, have haunted mods, you might want to say, I'm going to make that easier and put them on the zombies and water elementals. But those are the least common monsters in that area, and thus you are less likely to now get devoted modifiers to appear when transitioning into either fetid pool or submerged passage. So you actually have an incentive to put them on the rowers
鸟
and
DA
the other pack of rowers, because they are like the dominant monster in that area.
How
Which is
fair
kind of
this?
interesting. So again, like there are many pros and cons to controlling the difficulty and reward.
等一下啊，请问一下，用 Steam 登国际服有中文？当然没有啊，国际服本来就不会提供你中文，因为有中文的代理区，所以依照他们的规定是不会给你中文的。你中文就是找雕像那边用中文化哦，你不会有什么 Steam 的国际服中文版，不会，只有 Steam 上面的那个流亡暗道就繁中版哦。
And then yeah, when you click the next, when you next peer through the lantern, it will like show which mods you got. And yeah, hopefully you get as many good ones as you can. But also the other thing, just while we're on that topic, of the other reason why it's actually sometimes good to make things harder, in some sense, there's so many axes here that it's more like you want as many monsters as possible haunted by as many high tier things as possible. Is that the haunted monsters are the ones that can turn into the ones that you collect for crafting. So again, if you want to maximize your crafting output, you want to be putting the haunted modifiers of the highest tiers on the most.
你想要
have the highest density
让那个词让怪都吃到，或者更好
So again,
拿到
going
更
into
好的奖励，
mudflats as
更
the
难的
example,
图，就
you
是那
wanna
张
have the
图
rowers do that
哪
if
种
you
类
wanna
型怪
maximize
多，
your
你就把它
crafting
丢在它
output.
上面嘛。
So there are 2 axes
我
in
把是哪个
rewards
版本
for
能
why
用？
you wanna
我
make
是用
things
S
harder.
Bus 可以用，
But often
我
what I
用
will
电玩酒
I
吧
would
的
say
也可以
people are
用。
probably going to be like, I'm going to make things a bit easier to start with, and they get more comfortable with their character. As their character gets more powerful, they start to take a little bit more risks in that regard. And of course, if it becomes too hard and they over make it too hard for themselves, the mods rotate
我觉
pretty
得
frequently.
Make
To the
把它
point
讲
of you,
的
like running through an area, the next time if you then had to recreate that area, because you're like, nah, I've made it too
Make 把它
hard.
讲的好
The
像
mods will be have rotated, and you can adapt
很
your
复杂。
positions and be like, yeah, this is easier for me now. I'll wait a few more areas or some more levels until I then raise the difficulty again.
So how clearly is that like reward
ma.
system communicated in the UI? Can like someone who
他
hasn't
把
watched this know
这一整
that,
段
you know,
我觉得
killing
稍稍
more
讲的还比较
bosses
精
will
简，他
give more
怎么把它
code
讲的
to
那
next
么
zone and stuff like that?
难
That
理
isn't
解啊？
currently communicated, but it will be. You probably didn't see it in the live stream, but we will do that. At least on the hovers, when you hover over and it just says devoted, we will put like a little, you know, like or
刚刚看到弄头里面有尸体爆炸相关，是不是被 NEFT？NEFT 是什么？你知道打 nerf 吗 ？NERF 吗？还是啥？尸体爆你都看到了，你怎么不把整段文字看完？它是更改特效啊，那个让它比较明显啊，然后还有增加音效啦。然后有人是哪个实况组有测试啊？尸体爆破没有装伤层特效，容易降低画面的那个帧数哦。 DS 我跟你说，恶魔猫那边有个可爱的妹子在代班，我这边也可以请可爱，不行，他们都太小还不能代班。怎样啊？恶魔猫去睡觉，叫人家帮开台是不是？
We'll put it on the hovers of all the like tier things where it says like, you know, servant haunted, noble haunted, etc. Currently, I think it says something, but I can't remember what. But yeah, we'll do it.
让我问一下，最近因为我没有在追你们现在在流行啥，最近那个什么蹦蹦机，那是最近流行的东西吗？小朋友最近在学校一直在那什么蹦蹦机，我不知道是什么东西。有一段时间，然后为什么最近2、3间学校都一样啊？我的学生啊，可是之前都没有在这样讲啊，然后现在2、3间学校突然全部都在这样讲，我想说靠北这是啥小？对啊，幼稚园也都会唱啊。你说那什么一串波机哦，1元1串，对岸的梗，抖音、IG、抖音会员他们才大班，那个一定是他爸爸妈妈给他看的哦。那还有学校老师会教，他们的什么总务主任会教这些东西。我想说在带小朋友的时候，他们像这礼拜他们就很上课就很浮躁啊，然后一直在唱什么蹦蹦机的，我听不懂。我想我问他什么蹦蹦机，然后他就说就是蹦蹦机啊，我也不知道是什么。然后他也不知道是什么，他只是觉得这样讲话很好，他觉得唱那个很好笑、很好玩这样而已。我小幼稚园大班，这能贴吗？可以啊，你贴看看，我看是什么，了解一下他们在唱啥小。这是啥？
Oh shit, here we go again.
原来我在唱这个。他们听得这么刺耳吗？这是原版吗？叫卖车，观看次数17万哦，3个月前了，3个月前为什么小朋友现在才开始那个啊？他们网络比较慢是不是？我觉得他刚刚前面那个自己在那边喊啵啵机还比较好笑后面 remix 版本不好听有一种很烦躁的感觉，很像在乡下开车会把窗户摇下来，然后放很大声的人。
大家好，
是什么？
我是碧卡虎。
儿童律动，他妈就你们在教这些是不是？
跳跳吧 ，Let's go！
哪一家啊？那边教的什么挖沟？幼稚园听这个？幼稚园听这个？我怎么觉得不太像？他们唱的节奏好像也不太像这个啊。
a pass on making things more observable and all of that.
It's actually kind of
那个噔用太多了啊，听起来很烦躁啊。
In PoE where you have information about what is in a zone.
不准要科目3。其实学校科目3没有很多呢，只有少部分而已。
Which is kind of not really something we've ever really done before. So this UI actually sort of provides that, and it'll be interesting to see like whether that's actually useful and like whether we want to think about how we might communicate that again in the future, because like all that's now.
听的你都想去玩第一次了。那你很不健康哦。
Yeah, I got really excited actually when I saw that. I was like, oh.
哦，原本叫卖车莫名其妙就红了。
There's along that note, there's quite an interesting feature in maps that because
科目3那个，我觉得你要去看原版的跳舞还不错啊。原版那个他只是在人家喜宴上面跳舞，真的是蛮厉害的啊。
I think it's 5 packs or whatever, and you're going to have 20. It's generally going to be.
只是像后面的人只会跳前面而已。
So in maps there are these extra little symbols.
你没有看过原创的吗？那也不算原创啊，它只是在上面体验上面跳的，是不是？会给你们看原本的、啊。那一般人只跳前面嘛。 其实这个人他跳舞本身很厉害、欸，对啊，他本身跳舞很厉害啊。可是，一般人只跳前面这一段。看他很多动作关系到小孩子关节发育啊，人家跳舞又不是给小孩子学的，是因为他们在流行才会学啊。他这个机械舞这地方很厉害呢，这个超猛的、欸。 他这应该只是现场，也不是为这首歌编啊，他只是即兴跳舞而已吧，我觉得啦。婚礼上跳的舞蹈，后来柳州一小伙在考科目3时通过了，兴奋跳起此舞。围观者问：“这个是什么舞蹈？”他说自己也不知道叫什么舞蹈，那就直接叫科目3吧。科目3舞因此而爆红。这是原版啊，原本是这个跳的啊。 这个律动那些都很厉害呢。原版人是这样啊，这个跳舞很厉害啊。新中国的最近他们在流行以前的劲舞团，是不是？然后这个跳舞其实怎么讲？我那时候想说，在流行为什么脚要弄成那样，感觉快骨折了。因为看很多人跳那个，看起来好像跳到快骨折的感觉。 可是后来有人我学生说原版很厉害，什么叫我去看，然后我去看说原版那个律动那个感觉真的是蛮厉害的啊。机械舞算入门，可是它的律动感很好啊，是那个律动的感觉很好啊。音乐真的怂。 音乐它原本又不是那样，你们刚刚听的只是被remix版本过。《一笑江湖》我以前就有在听了啊，《一笑江湖》一开始又不是，这才是原本的啊。你这样说音乐差吗？ 你们听到的只是被 remix 过后的版本啊， 刚刚波波鸡都可以 remix 成那样了。他们很多都对，他们都 remix 版本之后才会红，可是我就 remix 没很好听呢、他混的那种我都觉得没有很好听，但是我知道有人很爱啦。原本这个很好听啊，这个没有怂吧？这有很怂吗？这首歌很像，这我以前也有听啊。那个科目三刚出来的，我想说为什么这首叫科目三啊？啊，这是原版啊，只是都被改的乱七八糟。可是改了之后，不知道为什么他们改了之后才会红。感谢不善交流的大叔续订4个月。你刚刚说这个 remix 之后很怂怎样的？那就好像那个，像不是很多周杰伦黑色毛衣也被 remix 了，那 remix 版本之后就不是很好听了。
This pack's going to be more common, and this one's going to be less common, and stuff like that, just to add that variance so that those variables can still play a role in when interacting with the modifiers. Otherwise, it would just be like, you know, oh, here's porcupines, I'll do X, and then 90% of packs you probably wouldn't care too much about. So we've added extra variables to make it that the packs and maps, you know, are
开到半夜不会啊，我等下就要去睡觉。我是玩台服啊，同时开我就不用玩国际服了。典狱长群，我靠！
You talking about your up and down arrows there made me realize what the next league is going to be: monster stock market investing. It's there. It's ready for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to
国外电音，但台湾慢摇就很多人讨厌。
a chanted question.
就好像大家都玩国际服，很讨厌台服一样。
So we one sec. There we go. So you've been flooding us with a lot of great quality of life updates in the lead up to this release. It's like some spring cleaning is going on right now, which I love to see.
这太怪怪了，怎么了？怎么了
？Missed the mark, which is the automation change and the resulting removal.
我会帮他们着想我帮他们着想厂商在问的时候，我还说他们那种，他们有因为现在很多人都是玩国际服，如果要他们对不对？原本玩国际服去介绍台服的，好像有点尴尬所以他们变成做影片的台服狂闪退，真的假的？可是我这几天开都没事啊，我重新去练一下下。
Why is it so unpopular?
为什么会闪退啊？你是更新之后吗？
Well, there's a fair. I'll go into a few things here, but yes, obviously missed the mark on this one.
最近有 GGG 有更新的渲染器啊。
I do, however, think this is solving some good things the way we've done it.
球力直接爆炸。
The problem is it
你说最近吗？
solved it entirely, and going from a bad solution to a bad solution.
所以你们现在是不能开的吗？
Not what we should be doing. So we will make further changes. I just don't know exactly when and to what degree. There's obviously discussions going on. So to get into some details there.
可以开到3点没有啊？我等一下要去睡觉，看完睡觉。我明天中午才要拓荒台服啊。
Specialized mechanic of, you know, like you can follow a build guide and you can see, oh, this person's using this instant skill, but at no point does a user necessarily know they.
有的游戏人物会闪退，目前原因不明。
The way that was before was just.
那是冲到什么东西吗？
More than anything, it just felt like such a strange like. Why should this even be a thing?
我倒是没有开剧情，我不知道
It was kind of almost.
我只有开来刷图，刷图而已，刷图是没事啊。然后有时候是渲染器问题啊。那 Vulkan 有试过吗？因为我现在是都用 Vulkan 啊，也都改过，那好像也没办法。
thing and
你就看他明天更新有没有修正吧。
It's kind of like this just sounds so dumb. And that's kind of why we were kind of sort of keen to change it. But on the other hand, I guess the problem, well, yeah, I mean, ultimately the issue there is that, you know, the solution is a
没有印象实力，它是游戏会闪退吧？
And
一样问题，
without compensation, that obviously feels really bad.
那就不知道了。
I do
然后回报
stand
看
by
看
the,
呗。
like being able to have it trigger while stationary is an advantage, and being able to use multiple is an advantage. But of course, then we talk about more into socket pressure, right? Using multiple, unless you were already using multiple, you know, isn't
画面
reasonable for
冻
most
结，
characters.
画面
So-
冻结好像是档案
we
有
can
问
talk
题
about
吧
all？ kinds of like what the actual solutions
你
would
那个
be,
应该
but
是档案坏
effectively,
掉吧？
From my perspective, I come down to if these things are just becoming passive skills, then why are they not just passive skills? That's what I've kind of come to recently. Like, we should probably take all of these, make them like, why? How is say time of need not
都
different
砍
from
过了。
steel skin? I understand one of them is regeneration and one of them is mitigation, but in the sense that like effectively what we're saying, steel skin, molten shell, etc., is
帮你
now
看看，
every 10 seconds do something.
我不知道
for
最近
like,
有问题耶，因为我自
which
己
is
刷一下
exactly
是
what
都
a
没
lot of
事
our。passives do. And so I was just thinking, like, we could move a lot of these into passives, and then what we could do is actually take what we originally intended for those skills and design awesome skills that are, because they were intended to be reactionary, and it'd be nice to actually design some stuff that is useful for that. Now, obviously, that's a longer discussion designing the specifics of all the skills, but there are also some objective problems that and balance problems that did happen from this outside of socket.
你是像这个吗？他们说打到一半，这是2、3天前的，打到一半画面会冻结，然后闪退，是这样吗？闪烁之后游戏就消失了。它是国际服的欸。我看一下，好像也没有人有，好像也没有说到底要怎么解决。这好像是国际服那个原厂更新问题欸。我看绿的上面也是一堆人说会画面停止，瞬间停止后崩溃。他们是说渲染器更新问题欸，可是没有解决办法。
Pressure.
发生原因不明，这也没办法，这只能等官方
So
了。
I'll start with General's Cry. Obviously nerfed by this, right? It isn't nerfed if you were to use it manually. It is nerfed automated, and when you look at it, no one's using it manually. Everyone's using it automated. And when I say everyone, I obviously mean, you know, the majority of people. So we are buffing General's Cry, and we are doing some other things Warcry adjacent, like I think there's some inconsistencies on a bunch of unique items which have like casting a Warcry and using a Warcry, and we're making that more consistent so that more things work in that regard. But there's heaps of little nitty gritty details there. Patch notes will hopefully clarify all that. Now, then there's mines, which is a big one.
Yeah.
Now, mine playstyle, aside from the annoying having it on left click, it going like tink, 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 tink the whole time, and that just being irritating. It is certainly the case that when it is triggering all the time with a support gem, obviously, if you now want to have the playstyle of throwing heaps of mines and then moving to detonate them all at once, which is how mines are meant to be played. You could do that before, and now you can't.
你这个问题上礼拜球力也一直闪退，就要设一堆最后修复档案就好。我上不是说刚刚球力又闪退了
which the mastery says your mines will detonate every X milliseconds while moving, and it will occur the moment you start moving from a stationary position. Now, the other third one I'll get into here is, I guess, bone armor from Necromancer. So, goodbye bone
所以你是挂在藏身处也会闪退，是不是？还是我开着挂网看看？没关系，我就加减挂着，看会不会退。发现 Necropolis 实况台每季前几个小时都超，因为他在做那个啊，他在征询大家意见做过滤器啊。去第8章，你说2至8。字体潮流的没办法，外国人看不懂中文字啊，他们台服没有买中文字体，这是系统预设文字啊。他们大概想说，这不是长一样吗？都是字。哎，我人不见了，它好大只。那2至8好像还好，等下看会不会闪退，还蛮稳的啊。中文字体怪怪的，因为它是预设文字啊，就是新细明体啊。因为外国现在的 POE 台服啊，是全部都由 GGG 负责啊，他完全不懂中文字啊。就像你们国际服 ID 不是可以取爆干场吗？因为他们分不清楚日文的平假名片假名啊，所以你们才会变得，因为日服开了之后，然后你们的那个中文 ID 可以取靠北场了。就是因为这样啊，有微软真的那好像要自己修改吧，我不知道实况能不能自己改。游戏设定，我好像没设什么啊。Vulcan 视性关闭，高阴影预设，低高中，关闭高16。关闭启用。密教资讯就知道制度。密教资讯我要去哪边看？2至8有办法看吗？不行，要回城镇，要回长生。
Neither the time nor the place.
等下剩下再看，先挂着看看。
And we have redesigned some of the nodes around there. So what have we changed? I'll see if I can remember all the details here. I think it's mindless aggression. And note, all these notables are going to probably get renamed due to the theme change, but I'll use the old names just because that's what everyone will know. So mindless aggression is
就是没什么机会开国际服，看情况吧。
more minion damage and multiplicative 20% more minion.
不过如果都同时开，确实比较少机会开。
Possibly worse.
因为我直接玩台服就好了。
At like level 30, but in game far superior in terms of actual damage output. You could argue it's slightly worse with spiritual aid, but I think that loss is ultimately inconsequential with the other changes here. Then there's the 4-pointer.
那你就用 D11就好了。
Bone barrier.
其实我也不知道我自己换 D11， 因为我之前换 Vulcan 啊，我之前都是用 D11 啊。
Okay, what we're doing is we're removing bone armor and we're adding a large amount of minion life is added as extra energy shield, which will increase the minion survivability for the amount lost by bone armor. So that should provide a good mitigation against, like, well, obviously with the mechanic of energy shield recharging, it'll help a lot towards your minions. Like, they take a bit of damage and then they have some time to get it back, and you know, it's not foolproof, but that's fine. What you have lost is obviously the bleed removal from them. Deal with it is my answer on that one. What we actually did find, by the way, is a lot of necromancers weren't actually using bone armor, and a lot were just using molten shell anyway. So I don't know how much of that is actually lost. And I know this is a bit of a rant, but I'll just keep going because again, people want to know about these changes. What else did we change there? We also
one more thing. Did you change the leech thing, or is that?
Yeah. So there is a. Oh, I don't want to misremember exactly. I'll go into the Unholy Might thing first. So Unholy Might, we're actually changing what Unholy Might does, which is better for summoners in some regards, but more so poison
7点开始更新，台服是早上7点开始更新，9点开服。
So Unholy Might now is 100% of physical converted
啊，
to
国际
chaos,
服我不知道。
as well as a I think it's 25%.
台版懒人包已经有做影片了，可以去看。
So hopefully that is enabling a lot more different unique items and obviously Sin's Rebirth and all of that throughout the game. But also poison summoners in theory.
感谢 TONYCHEN 加入会员。哥，感觉我要唱大了，是不是？有的说用 PC 版，有人说就是每一种方法都跟你讲啊，让你去试试啊，因为真的是每个人会遇到的情况不一样，每个人适合的渲染器也不一样。前阵子有一阵子一直出事的是用 AMD 显卡的会出事啊。AMD 显卡是不是很长？不管什么游戏都会出事啊。
Can't remember. We were experimenting with some leech. I can't remember if we stuck with it, but I think we had a 1% of damage dealt by minions is leech to you as life.
那个一定没有什么确切答案啊，因为那个很难，
bone barrier as well.
你很难找到啊。
Should account for a lot more incoming life recovery.
或者说是技能崩溃，像这信念浪涌，那还可以找到。NVIDIA 的控制面板有什么要改？那个着色器快取要关闭啊！你们知道吗？它新的这个其实没有很好用啊。哎，按错了。这个管理 3D 设定，然后里面。边有一个这个着色器快取大小，好，要设定停用啊，关闭啊，不要用啊，因为那个 POE 渲染器改了之后，这个着色器快取会出问题啊。台服早上7点。剑与拓荒用什么升华？你是玩元素弓吗？如果是元素弓就用锐眼啊。7点呐，台服是7，他是说什么时候更新呢？7点就可以更新啊，大哥。7点更新，9点开服啊。
Especially on summoners, and we are actively discussing solutions to that one. I think where we are currently landing is that we want to have corruption implicits possibly on all the different minion base types, so bone ring, the bone shields, and the whip.
好，有人来问了，电脑大神，我教你啊，我教你一个方法。现在加入我们 Discord 一般频道，然后说你的电脑预算多少，玩什么游戏，还有要做什么事，可以帮我开个单吗？大概像这样子，然后在这边打一句话，然后你等个2个小时，或者你随时在看，可以稍微回应一下哦。1个小时进来，哎，就会有世界大战了，好不好？就会有世界大战，你就可以看哪一个比较符合你心目中的价位标准，然后你就照它的单去配就好了，可以吗
？Minion weapons, which grant various different skills like Convocation, the offerings, Desecrate. I know a lot of people end up just auto casting Desecrate and offerings with the wand, but for people who don't have this,
一直用剑鱼后期玩会比较吃力啊，当然会啊，因为还要剑鱼要看体积啊。
Corruptions too. I'm a bit iffy on that one, so I know generally I shouldn't say things that we're not definitely doing, but you know, just speaking freely on that one. So hopefully that is at least a temporary solution to alleviate some socket pressure, but we probably do need to do more. but doing more in the next week is, you know, probably kind of hard. So I would look forward to hopefully seeing more of that in the future. But that's where we're at with that pretty much. Big rant.
It's like this automation change kind of revealed just how much of a very potent band-aid the left-click automation was, because it's opened up this whole can of worms of being like, well, it's exposed how these skills designs are all a bit problematic, you know, these ones that encourage you to have them just up all the time.
因为 GGG 那边说，他们这一次所有平台都会同步更新，然后台服这边因为时间问题，就顺延6个小时到早上9点。加入会员之后，音效就在里面下载，叫做这里订阅户小圈圈，右上角点开啊，就有石狗、以阳、哔哩巴波、米口、古拉啊、歌姬、安妮亚啊，反正音效都在这里啊，还有风筝的。
Fast off cooldown. These are things that potentially need to be readdressed, right?
For
我觉得改成早上9点比较好啊。
I mean, even if
我才不想要半夜拓荒哎。
Which was one of the first quality of life things we announced. Like, you know, it's like, well, we're going to change this Pantheon thing. Like, surely that's good for everyone, not having to redo. And then all
你这边没有订阅户小圈圈？
But now I don't want to
你是哪边会员？
on and all this, and we're just looking at
你是Twitch吗？Twitch 应该会有啊。
But then there are all these niche.
不是，你有连接你的 Discord 账号吗？ 你要做连接呢？你没有做连接，那个机器人没办法给你啊。
Often what happens is we change a system that we entirely think is positive. And yes, either because we've not given it enough time internally, or because again, it's very hard for even 100 people to find things as quickly
感谢地狱恋者续订32个月。
hundreds of thousands of people.
你的账号要做那个啦，要做连接啦，不然他机器人不知道啊。
Afterwards to fix. Obviously, we address the Pantheon thing by allowing you on a character by character basis to then disable and enable the Pantheon upgrades to fix a bunch of niche builds. But yeah, with a game as like expansive as Path of Exile, with all the millions of different builds, it is pretty hard to change anything without affecting something. And in this case, it was just we made a change that affected a lot more than we had originally thought about. And yeah, we're doing a lot of solutions here, but there is certainly need for a much grander solution when it comes to that.
NVIDIA 那个就它的控制面板啊，这个啊，它不 N 卡不是都有这个管理吗？然后你控制面板打开。 控制面板里面有一个管理 3D 设定，然后往下拉有一个着色器，反正它名字不一定是这个，但是就是反正就是着色器快取啊，然后把它关闭啊。好，就在这里管理 3D 设定，然后着色器快取大小这边把它用。
That left click thing, but I think where we're at right now is
工程店这样很好啊。 火灵改动对守护者影响很大吗？大部分都靠大哥来输出，前期是靠大哥，后期是靠火灵的。可是我觉得，至少在红土，至少到 T16 结束应该是还好了。大哥之前的就有点超模了。
This will be good once we get these other things implemented down the line. Do you feel compelled to maybe like hold off on the change until you can get it all done at once?
Well, I think sometimes, but I think in this case, I think the lesser evil has been met, and yeah. I think that it is worth sticking to this one, especially with us fixing all those actual objective problems with the balance and actual nerfs that occurred as a result of it. Sure, not every single use case is covered, but I think the other ones are nowhere near as consequential. And I do think it will actually play relatively well. But yeah, in some cases, yeah, I'm sitting there like, okay, do we revert that or do we, you know, aim to get all the fixes in? We're generally pretty fast with reacting to things like this. We generally can make changes pretty quickly. But yeah, it is a hard decision to make for sure. Like you definitely lose sleep over that one. But like that's what we do, and often as like it's actually responding to this one has actually been fun in at least a development sense because it is promoting a bunch of these other changes that have been like, honestly needed for a while.
Yeah.
like especially when it comes to the socket pressure thing, like that, it is honestly unacceptable.
国际服的话，你就按国际服那个捷径右键内容，开启目标目的地资料夹，然后把那个 GGPK 丢进去就好了。
I can't promise by the end of next week we have the right answer, and I can't promise we're necessarily going to do something, but it is.
但是其实现在后面好几个版本啊，其实不建议再载 GGPK， 直接更新就好。因为你要挖档案。
It was such an effective band-aid that like ripping it off now is like allowed you to kind of get to the meat of some of these problems, which I'm excited to see what you do with these like skills that are all have this design where they were just chucked on left click, because hopefully we get some much more interesting skills out of it down the line as a result.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, already I have a lot of cool ideas. It's just a matter of now finding the resources to get them all in.
瑞妍闪电剑这一版12等直接闪电剑还是剑雨比较好？我是觉得剑雨比较好。连接好 DC， 那你要等他一下。你如果刚连接要等他，他没那么快。然后 YouTube 那边要注意哦，要你是1个月70的哦。
Have you guys considered using pause tech to pause the game during NPC conversations when you're otherwise defenseless, or maybe other solutions like making you untargetable during dialogue?
I would say yes, at least in the especially in the context of PoE 2, which does have pausing.
Is there any actual reason we can't add pausing to PoE 1?
Oh, you're doing it again?
Probably not.
Like, I know it's kind of been one of those things that we've, sorry. It's one of those things that like we kind of did, and then we're like, well, I don't know. I'd have to talk to Reese and find out what limitations there were. We certainly were scared by it when we first added it. It was like, this is going to break so much shit, but then it didn't really in PoE 2, so maybe it will.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I can't see any obvious reason why it wouldn't be able to be ported over relative.
爆炸箭图等前面用什么末日烙印
but it's probably something we can work around.
Right.
I mean,
任何能快速拖网都可以。
NPC conversations though is that
对，还有气人
there's various
哦，
triggers that occur.
因为那个退群这边订阅也是要77块了，所以我才会两边都要求70块以上了。那所以 YouTube 那边原本的30块就会变成是纯赞助啦。
like opt into pausing on some and not on others.
There's also the question of other people in the zone. As well. Like there's like a ton of random things that would probably.
The way our pausing works right now.
还是裂开，你还是不能用啊。我感觉你的情况有点特殊啊。
But I mean, technically in multiplayer, if you in proximity like that, you can just be like defeating.
你是开台服才会闪退吗？还是怎样？
Start trying to loot some stuff and leave you to die. But yeah,
你是登录就闪退哦？那你国际服能不能开？你是国际服
to find mini games that don't end up just having exploitative cases around that, and that would be a lot more actual work, you know.
What about the untargetable buff? Buff
登录就闪退，你在呢？
But it's the whole like I'm in a map and Alva's there and like oh no I'm gonna die or something, or like I just want to reprieve and I just go and like click Alva and then I'm like oh phew I'm safe now, and then I get
in a world where people can log out. How is
登录马上就闪，通常是档案有相冲啊。
But it feels like well at least logging out has a cost to the portal, right? Like I mean it isn't quite the same, but in the sense that like. It feels exploitative, whereas logging out does not. Like it feels like I'm cheesing some mechanic that's unintended for that. Like I wouldn't want to do a solution that again feels like.
I counter argue that comment because I think logging out feels exploitative. Whereas if you're talking to an NPC who protects you with a bubble because they have NPC magic, I'm like that seems like an in-game thing. Like that seems reasonable.
I buy that, but also logging out in PoE 2, of course, will log you right back into
yeah,
you were.
Be careful now because you're going to get us talking into changing how logout works.
Yep.
I have to say, after the hands-on with PoE 2, I love the pausing and the reconnecting you exactly where you were when if the game crashes or something.
技能4天第一人打。
Which was turned out to be very beneficial.
那你有那个吗？等一下，你几乎都试过了。那你玩其他游戏都正常吗？
It certainly helped.
Yeah.
你也重装过游戏了？ 国际服有重装过了。
There will be a solution to your problem, is what I'm saying. And pausing might be one of them, and otherwise we'll engineer and design some other solution. Like there will be something, but yes, it has come up quite a bit recently just because of the scope of PoE 2, and generally when we
重灌游戏，重灌 Windows 时候重灌过了。
PoE 1 as well. Like what are we doing? Like let's fix it. So. it'll happen at some
开
point.
大绝系统中，他重灌过了
Before we get to the league, we'll talk about the
Uh-huh.
other kind of quality of life related thing.
全部都重灌过。
which was the announcement of the Ashling
硬碟坏了。
So we've been wanting itemized Ashling crafts for quite some time. Which is
有没有
pretty awesome that we're getting that now, but it's
这边去买个硬碟试看看啊。
the current veiled orb chaos style effect. That especially was a really nice like mid-level entry crafting option for a lot of players. So to have that removed seems like quite the bummer. As you had the the more random but more accessible version versus Ashling's much more
因为
deterministic.
你是说登录就闪退，有点怪。
version. So why did you get rid of the regular veiled effect?
I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say the intentions to just
换主机版
get rid
什
of
么
things,
操作
but I also kind of
不好说啊，我也是换主机版啊，而且1年才好啊，1年坏掉才好啊，你1年还在保固内啊。为此拿给别人检查，他妈华山不是？等一下，为什么你要拿？为什么要给别人检查华山？你找原本买的地方检查就好啦。1年内都是保固期吧？怎么会要额外花3000？
don't see it as a loss to be able to kind of, where possible, not retain every single little crafting thing. I would say that the crafting is, at this point, like quite bloated in a sense of like, it is quite hard for someone
检查收3000呢，还没处理好。
profusely to figure out exactly how to craft the best item, and that's not necessarily a problem.
我怎么觉得有点
taking the opportunities to remove something that is honestly just bloat at some points is a win, especially if we can.
工厂外面检查电脑，单纯检查不是200块而已吗？我之前去检查，不是在买的地方检查的。 我拿回去原价屋检查是因为我原价屋买的，拿回去检查是免几的。可是我要过去比较麻烦，然后我去别家店检查，他们是收200块啊。
And then obviously when we then go to say, is this coming core?
3000块你都可以重新买硬碟。
How do we want to do it? If we want to do it, maybe it's absolutely busted in
现在
so many ways that we don't want to.
SSD TV 的也才3000以内。
crafting things we're adding, like you don't have a shortage of different crafting things in the game. Like it's certainly a little bit out of control in a good way, and in sometimes a bad way. And more.
你3000是有换零件吗？
especially when.
而且你不是新买的吗？
You only need to wait a league or two for things like that to come back, and there are always just so many other ways to craft your items. I don't think losing that is.
我之前去检查，有个问题就是在家里没办法用，然后再去店家测都正常，就后来是插座问题，插座太旧，然后还有家里电压不稳。
Like services as opposed to trades. We're doing a lot,
100%.
as much as possible. Like I eventually want to make sure we add a thing where. For even mirroring items, even though that's like the nichest of the niche in the game, we're talking about, the select few. I do want it to be that, there is a way that you can do that without having to trade your item to someone. So there are a few designs there even, and, like we will, hopefully we will eventually
检测加重灌 Windows 3-4000，
especially when it comes to trusting someone with your item. I don't like that at all. So yeah, we'll hopefully work around, but
商家有点缺德哦。
skills and all of that. There's not really a lot you can do about that.
我觉得这样有点缺德。
Fine, but when it comes to actually like loaning someone your item, I'm certainly not kind of in favor of that thing. And so yeah, hopefully we can see the removal of the rest of those. And
这问题是你也没解决啊。
Yeah, I'm super keen on those changes. So if the thinking is to kind of like slim down on some bloat, I certainly don't disagree that like the crafting system might have like a bit much going on. I think in this particular instance, the reason why you've seen this reaction to it is this particular one little aspect of bloat. It was actually kind of like used in almost every mid-level craft, so it feels a little bit.
重灌的 Windows 是不是特殊版？
I guess.
现在不是都可以随那个吗？已经没有不用绑主机板了。 我换主机板也可以移掉序号啦。
One of the most in-depth crafting systems we ever have, and you could argue about standard league, but I mean, my answer again there is deal with it. And then later on there will be more crafting systems, and more new things and more interesting things. So.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm super excited about the Necropolis crafting. It was stoked. The thing I said after last league, I was like. You guys have to do like some sort of crafting league this time. I feel like it's the only answer to like.
因为我刚刚原本是要叫你去试塞那个。
Let's talk a bit about that actually. So Affliction was
删一些文件啊，就你说你电脑全部重灌了。
Maybe mine was certainly extremely rewarding. Why do you think it was so popular? And were you worried about kind of like coming into this league after that, the correction, effectively?
重灌照理说也不用去删了。
So popular. I mean, obviously, I mean, at the start, it kind of wasn't in so many ways. It was certainly.
现在随机版对啊，我就是直接绑在账号上面了。你只要有办那个 Outlook 就可以了。
People kind of got their heads around, or you know, around the difficulty of the character builds to handle the difficulty. Yes, it became Magic Find Ruckus League. Why was it popular? I mean, it was different. It's not something we had done before in so many regards. It was using new art and
重灌其实真的没什么啊，就是。 而且现在甚至有些可以直接字体这边直接重灌啊。假设你原本还可以开的话，你可以直接按系统重装，然后它就自动问你说要不要从你原本这边直接重灌，连需要都不用重新弄，就可以直接全部反安装了。
I'll tell you, I've never had that experience before. I've never, you know, been to the point where, well, not quite like this, where really it feels like the only thing left on the filter is unique leather belts and unique heavy belts and a couple other things, and there's still too many belts to try, and you're still just like, oh my god, there are freaking belts everywhere.
It was a bit too far.
Yeah, to say the least.
I mean, even just from a server perspective, the level of the number of players we could get on a server per server this league was much lower than it has been before, and even that was started to become a bit of a problem.
武力承载
The issue there is actually what happens is when monsters stay alive longer, because Affliction was making things last live longer, they are getting hit more, and when a monster is alive, they cost more than when they're dead. And so the moment, and then obviously when you've got
一只怪活着的时候比他们死掉
100 monsters a second, combined with, like, you know, the 50% increased attack speed, soul eaters, and all of that, you know, you are nothing can survive that level of absolute mayhem, as in hardware wise. So, but yes, there is going to be a bit of a detox.
那我先问一下，你有没有试过？那么最近这边改渲染器，渲染器我记得巴哈那边好像有教学，从外面还是雕像那边有教学，忘记了。可以从外面直接更改渲染器，因为有人是连灯都登不进去，因为渲染器的关系，他一开始就闪退，他连灯都登不进去。跟你这个好像有点像。如果不是电脑问题，我不知道你要不要试看看。如果你是玩其他的，对啊，你从外部文件改，你有改过了吗？也改过了。也改过，我就不知道还能改什么了。电脑也重灌了，什么你不然就要检查你在开 POE 的时候，把那个管理员开起来，看你的记忆体吃多少。怎么改？我记得巴哈还是雕像那边有，你可能要问一下，因为我没有存。
To some degree. But on the other hand, we have changed a lot in the end game to the point where hopefully the meta is so different that it kind of just feels a little bit different as opposed to necessarily like less or worse. There is one other change I'll talk about, and I'm keen for people's feedback. So one problem that we kind of have is that the amount of like obviously if you were to farm mage bloods, headhunters, etc. via divination,
不然就音效啊。
like there is a somewhat
reliable
way to
you
get your doctors, you get your apothecaries and whatnot.
你测试的时候可以先把你只留键盘滑鼠，其他都把其他的东西都先拔掉测试啊，都一样秒退嘛。我之前有一次遇到会闪退登不进去是喇叭的问题。
And so we have actually made some changes where the league rewards of various leagues, especially the ones that were quite
都试看看吧，不然也没办法。
Like Tujan and a few other leagues, we have cut back on the amount of stacked decks they're giving. And you're like, oh wow, nerf my fun stacked decks. To compensate for that, and what it has allowed us to do is we have actually multiplied the drop rates of your mage bloods, your headhunters, etc. by 2.5 times.
世界掉落率魔血猎手上升2.5倍。不要再去玩命运卡了。未来预计要把它移掉，让你们都靠打怪来掉。
like you were all to get that thing out. But I think a lot of the reason was just the idea that one thing that kind of sucks a bit is that you're getting
凌晨2:5，几点可以进去排队？国际服吗？唔知，应该2点吧。
Actually, not anymore. We have changed.
2点吗？
It's true that.
我不知道，因为我没有半夜跟国际服过。我等一下也要去睡觉了。他台服的话是7点更新，应该以前是 Garena 是8点半可以登进去啊。
You want the exclusive items to some extent to
命运卡他说未来会慢慢移除啦，这一季不就少了很多吗？这一季先移除头目掉落的。
In general, you should be seeing a lot less like random Star Forges appearing before anyone's even killed Uber Shaper kind of thing. And also, obviously, you've still got the Voidborn.
马克感觉真的是
You've got Valdo's maps which will yield whatever.
看有观察很多，还是说自己有在玩，有观察到玩家现象？跟光头之前差 Q&A 差好多。
We want to see a lot more of those drops come from actually killing.
哎，9点很难过，多少难过？9点很正常吧？靠，半夜3点台湾哎。
Actually farming the counter as opposed to just mass
发疯了
farming on a mass level from specific leagues.
虽然我是没差，不管他3点更新还是9点更新，我都是中午才玩。
Let us know.
哦，你上夜班的哦。
We have a little bit of time to make some changes there if needed.
等一下，你不要讲这种话了，我也有点不知道该怎么办。主播早安，有你陪着一起等开服，好幸福。这么多中文实况组，只有你这样陪粉丝一起开服，不能看完要睡觉了。你不要说的太早哎、他们等一下半夜他们会开台的、啊，我没有在半夜开台的，哦，我没有在半夜开台的，我开了实况快10年了，我没有在半夜开台的。以前因为大部分我假日也都要上班，我没办法开，我没办法开半夜啦。DA+1
I'll let people share their opinions on that one.
9点是你上床时间，那你只好不睡啦。
Drops coming from the bosses and not just from random decks, but anyway, it might be controversial. We'll see.
每日花火安安。
A lot of wins in chat, so it seems like
对啊，他们要半夜开啊，我帮他们度过这段时间啊，好不好？我等下帮你缓冲到剩1个小时、2个小时，然后他们等一下他们就开台。恶魔猫那边不是要请人代班，请一个妹子代班是不是？你们刚不是讲？
And I must say, like, I played the most I've ever played this league, and I was getting to the point, like in that 2
对啊，他们国际服啊，我台服啊。
doing things and creating builds and doing content that I just hadn't done before, and I think a lot of players had that same experience. And looking at the overall economy, I expected with how crazy the league was.
抱歉啦，我这边没有妹子可以给你们看啊，好不好？这边都男的啦。那如果有请到妹子，年纪也太小了，很危险啊。
We're like, sure, some things like if you were trying to compete with the Giga Juicers for the items that they were trying to buy, like their bows or whatever, then yeah, you were having a hard time. But for the most part, a lot of stuff was really accessible, and it felt like a really fun league in that regard. And that was actually the biggest, I think, contributor to why it was such a fun league for myself and I think many others. Do you have any thoughts on that and like that economic shift and other ways that could be captured?
I mean, I love it. I love how the economy goes wild based on the content we add.
而且如果你们要看第一时间高效率打上去什么的，还是推荐你们去看他们的，好不好？还是推荐你们去看老皮啊、恶魔猫他们比较会在半夜第一时间，然后不关台，然后一路冲上去的。这边基本上不会做这种事情啊。 我就只想玩我想玩的，我也不在乎赚什么大钱，哦，就慢慢玩就好了，然后以刷图为主。
Maybe there are a lot of people who are like, no, it was too hard, and I felt like everyone else got ahead of me. We don't know too much about that, but I mean, the league's ending now.
从不抢滩
What happened happened.
因为我想法很简单啊，我是觉得他们有时候都很拼，然后很拼的结果就是。 开季开40个小时好了，40个小时、50个小时这样，好30个小时，然后玩的把自己玩得很累，然后之后1个礼拜通关，然后退坑。 你看每次玩到季末都基本上都剩下我比较多，我就觉得游戏这一季有，对不对？有2-3个月呢，甚至4个月。那甚至说，如果像我们5月啊、4月你要接别的游戏，5月又要接别的，这样今年游戏比较多嘛，4、5、6、7、8都有游戏。那其实 PO 1个月慢慢玩也够啊。他们会在4月19前毕业，确实，他们还要火炬哦。啊，那厂商对我是比较友善啊，他知道我是，他知道我上班当老师什么的。啊，他们基本上厂商都要求我就是有开实况推广就好了，所以我这边没有像他们会被要求什么要开几个小时什么的，没有。不过他们觉得这样很好玩，不排除啊，对啊，不排除啊，只是我看他们的脸看起来不像而已啊。每次看他们像我早上，假设我中午开台，我通常早上我就起床啊，然后我看他们实况打到哪边的时候，那个老 P 的脸感觉都快死掉了，然后恶魔猫的脸更臭，他们那个脸看起来都不太像玩得很快乐的感觉啊，还是那是快乐的表现，我不知道啦。
But yeah, I mean, I do agree. At least I played a lot. My friends played a lot. Like we certainly got into it. A bunch of people here were playing a lot, and I've heard mostly only
老 P 的干很快乐，
from
我怕他的干很硬欸。
you know, outside of the very early in the league where we had some misbalance, like the positivity for Affliction was very high. It's actually making me think like a little bit more about how we can find some way to make some of it core, but I don't quite know how to do that just yet.
他这马克真的是有在玩游戏的呢。
has the whole like when there's less than 50 monsters remaining, you're
F 不抢滩通常会价格飞涨，其实也还好啦。你玩到后面 F 的情况这一季还很难讲，因为不知道呱呱能不能刮，因为 GGG 那边有说啦，这季台服的呱呱也是由他们负责抓，我不知道他们会抓的怎样就是了。哦，也许他们对台服外挂也是没辙，不清楚。所以这一季不知道还会不会有股票现场。那以台服来说，就是国际服初期有办法小通货换大通货啦，台服比较没办法，只有很早期，例如前几个小时比较有办法，后面通常都是以神圣使为标准。你只要有这个观念转化一下，其实在台服也还行啊。然后现在 GGG 的改动方式让你越来越偏向，其实有一点偏向变成以大通货为交易目标啦。国际服其实已经好几季，像是我玩国际服的时候，其实我每次看人家在推荐国际服，然后都说推荐搬砖，我自己也觉得很神奇。我自己国际服玩了，虽然我后面跳台服，可是我其实以前玩也是4、5年的。我印象中我很少在搬砖欸。你如果说1点多版本，那时候搬砖还合情合理。鱼图天赋出来之后，到底谁在搬砖啊？除非你反而是第一梯次的人才要搬砖吧？第一梯次的人先搬 C 货，然后去换核心装吧。搬砖在开玩笑？没有啊，他们很认真在讲的啊。你看那个国际服那边的。很多人在认真讲的啊，推荐你到那边，他们推荐的原因都是说，新手在那边可以慢慢的搬砖换装备啊。我是觉得，即使是国际服，好不好？你应该也要学会你的鱼图天赋，你想刷什么去刷，而不是搬那个 C 啊。现在搬 C 真的很亏啊，除非你是速度很快的第一批的人，你可以直接凑出整套，对不对？你可以很快速的整套有效率的凑，像是那个国际服还有插件嘛，就是一次巨仓排好，一次领出来卖出换 C 这样子，这样才有搬的理由啊。但是如果你跟我一样是睡到饱的人，然后拓荒一个剧情他妈就要打10个小时，你真的没有理由搬砖啊。就是鱼图天赋弄一弄，会比你搬砖的效率好很多啊，这真的啦。学习一下鱼图天赋哪些 鱼图天赋我这一季没有推荐大家怎么点，我只是想跟大家说，如果你对自己的流派不是那么熟悉的人啊，不是那么熟悉的人哦，你他妈不要学那些实况组在那边点那个屋顶了啊，一堆人们点屋顶，然后词缀变超强，然后打不赢，好不好？点你想要打的就好了，不要学人家点什么那个屋顶的东东啊，屋顶点下去，那词缀会变强啊。这季屋顶好像还在吧？屋顶的能力应该一样吧？词缀效果加强，对不对？千万啊！新手你想要怎么点都可以啊，点你想要玩的，你不一定要抄一些实况组推荐的，他们有些效率档可能不太一样，像是你们刚刚说的小波好了，小波很多攻略其实还蛮不错，但他自己的他会玩，然后他进度又快，对不对？像他上一季推荐你们是吧，刷通牒。我看很多人跟着小波点啊，直接大爆死啊！因为小波一开始那个通牒还有点屋顶啊，头破血流，我跟你讲。他自己秒改，可是看他影片的人在已经开始跑，他们不会马上去追影片，他也没追到实况就不知道啊，然后就大爆死啊！上一季很多人大爆死啊。那个屋顶不要去点好不好？鱼图天赋最上面那个斜斜的屋顶先不要去点。你如果流派或者你没有那么熟悉，不要跟着点屋顶。宁愿你多绕点路，去拿一些什么相连地图掉落什么的，随便你点。你想玩什么点什么，中文字应该是看得懂啊。哦，想玩什么就点什么，先不要去点屋顶，好不好？我已经看太多人在那边点那个屋顶，然后打不赢了。新手能玩散打吗？我不确定，我也不是什么散打高手，我也没用散打开荒过，所以我不确定。你可以去问其他散打狂热分子。
Your map boss is empowered by wisps. I don't know. In the live stream, I can't remember. Too many things going on.
是有点相连地图，这季可能会断。这季会断吗？看起来好像还好。但国际不会更新的是，因为没小点。不是啊，这几季没小点，你也不太会断图啊。你说小点战神是不是？也不太会断吧？我们有资金都可以。你说拓荒有资金吗？就像小波最近翻了一键3连，超厉害，0到2000万伤害。你自己，我就举一个最简单的，对小波而言啊 ，EDPS 900的武器的带有攻速或爆率，对他来说是很简单就可以取得的东西。我就问你们这几季玩元素攻的，你们哪时候拿到900加的元素攻？然后他的成长的过程，他中间曲线他过得非常的快，他成长过程过得非常的快，他30个小时还是几个小时，他就有魔血了，对不对？你们还在头破血流的在那边打怪。开荒 BD， 我有发影片讲一些我想玩的，可是都是变异技能，然后我不知道价格会多少，所以我打算自己跑吧。所以第一支可能还是先选不需要变异技能的吧。大哥火灵先上去看看。
Think how to put that into core. Like that's a lot of character.
有时候你参考别人，要考虑到自己有没有像他那么厉害，对不对？
We'll do that, but ideally, even just the magic finding kind of part of it with some regulation to some degree would be fun to add. But I mean, who's to say the current league isn't going to end up having? Sure, it won't be magic finding once crafting and whatnot. It's probably heavily going to change the economy dynamically, and that will evolve over time as well. So.
I think it's really.
国际服跟有
really
刚刚有人讲了
You guys are like you liked what you saw with the outcome of that. Like I think the technical side of how Affliction achieved that with like things being laggy and all that sort of problem is not ideal. But the end result was something we really enjoyed. But there's this perception that you guys at GGG are sometimes a little bit grinchy about this stuff. Where you're like, we don't want you to have items and currency. So it's good to hear that.
I mean,
it's more
I am playing the game every league till the high end game and mostly to level 100, and I am farming all these things. Like I'm not sitting there going like, damn, I don't want all this currency. Like
what I don't like is when you like press Alt in the game and you get disconnected from the server or like random stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like I don't want it to technically break. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say one big shift. Like just talking about playing the game here, and like I do want to understand like a lot of what all these QOL changes are, a lot of what we're doing, a lot of
确实这季很多便利性，他说还有很多在做。
A lot of what is coming in Necropolis League, with respect to especially all the in-game changes, is a resultant of our team playing the game.
这些改动都是源自于
a lot more.
马克的这段话是在说，之前没有这些优化更新，是因为克里斯都没在玩吗？
League the game.
这季我们更新很多优化，是根据于我们开发团队自己游玩的结果，所以之前没有更新的都是。他之前不是就是说，不就有说他没在玩了？你说马克啊，他现在都有吧？他刚刚一直在讲说他自己玩的感觉啊。
Because you did these changes.
Yeah, we started. So I mean, the whole sextant thing is just like get me away from this. And I'm in game going like, okay, I've just allocated this tree. I'm like, damn, I don't want to play this anymore. And then I'm like, I don't want to have to recycle this, and then it might be wrong again. I want to experiment and try some stuff.
克里斯，可是克里斯从一开始好像就
，and obviously I can respec, but I don't want to have.
哇，你们可以想想克里斯设计的赛季，你们知道克里斯亲自设计的赛季是哪一个吗？魔符，两个渲染器撑住了，真的假的？哇，那我觉得你是不是要像那间帮你检查那个，把它用个黑名单啊，顺便给他1星好评啊？他帮你重灌检查电脑加重灌系统，收3000块，他真的收得下去哦？我是真的觉得他很扯，3000块他敢收？感谢 KAISENQ 的订阅。
Just go trading, which we know is a flawed system currently, and we've spoken about trading a lot.
因为魔符有一个赛季，有魔符赛季啊。我这边跟你们讲股啊，讲一讲，魔符那个赛季有多好玩。魔符呢，就是你们现在看到众多魔符有分1阶、2阶跟3阶。1阶5个你凑齐5个1阶魔符去找到10阵之后，可以换成2阶魔符。它是从这里面挑一个的稀有度出来。所以你再把5个2阶魔符再放进去10阵里面，可以再抽一个稀有度出来，变成3阶魔符。5个3阶魔符里面，你放几个传奇等级的，像你们现在看到什么自然组织那些，随机抽出来，如果抽到就会变成狼王之眼，然后词缀还是全部随机。然后那一季他妈就只有这个东西，新技能好像还没几颗。然后挑战还靠北难，你知道那一季挑战是什么吗？那一季挑战有鉴定所有的传奇，要手动鉴定哦，你要鉴定所有的传奇。所以那时候新出了一个传奇爪，就是那个魅惑爪，有没有？挖矿那个魅惑爪，那时候它的价格还是用崇高石嘛。那时候魅惑爪未鉴定的100要331吧，因为大家要拼挑战的话就要鉴定啊。那时候的挑战很难哦，都很靠北哦。
At PoE1 around that in the future. But like, I'm sitting here trying to buy unmaking orbs, having the most frustrating time ever, just because no one's replying to me and all of that. You know, like I know the pain. And then I'm like, okay, we need some sort of like Atlas Tree loadout.
对啊，以前都很折磨啊，现在很简单，以前还要打专家嘞。
So that I can play the in game the ways I want without feeling so punished.
好，太好了，用你的方式玩到后期。
Okay, like wandering path. you know, I want to play the end game my way, but if wandering
这
path
句话是超赞
is
同
too strong.
他是不是觉得终于对到一个讲人话的？变克里斯
It is too powerful, and so you know, there's things like that where that comes where why we've removed a number of the keystones and whatnot is because if you feel like you have to do something, and so you could argue, okay, well, nerf
交易方式优化。他们说 POE 2会有交易所，如果交易所在 POE 2表现的不错，那 POE 1有机会也会有。
Not have to do it, get rid of it. That's generally how I feel about it.
不好就删了它，增加更酷的、更好的天赋。
Keystones might end up in the same ballpark, and you know what? Might remove them later and add new ones as well. That's just how it will be. But yeah, anyway, I don't want it to be so like everyone has tree A, everyone has tree B, everyone has tree C because the keystones mean that you have to do that. If people want to do that, because that's like, you know, metas are metas, you can't get around that. But if it's that
POE 拿都4.0，不知道，可能不会有4.0。以后会有3.99版了。
Like if it's okay for one league, you have fun, and then if you feel like you have to do something that isn't enjoyable, go away. I don't want it. Like it shouldn't exist.
You love to hear it. You love to hear it. But I have a follow-up question that's completely unrelated. What about the rucksack?
小背包没
You're
了。
lucky you got it for those 3 months.
因为3个月算你走运。
Oh no.
好，听到了吗？现在新的游戏总监说，赛季背包给你们用了3个月了，这是你们走运啊，懂哦？
I just know ultimately. You might see it back one day, but like, you know,
I'm honestly surprised that Chris was even okay to even let you do that.
I don't think he was okay with it.
Really?
I think I snuck
What you
that
do
one.
was even okay.
克里斯原本不赞同马克去做这个赛季升华的背包，
Even let you do that.
I don't think he
他一开始也是不同意。
was okay with it.
Really?
I think I snuck
You,
that
you
one.
stuck that one in without.
Well, you weren't okay with it either. Like
你一开始也不同意。
we had a massive.
我觉得他是好人，他是站在玩家这一边的，他是好人。只有他这优化包包什么都是他在做，哎。另外，这个有自己的坚持，光头是觉得那样不好，他散发着圣光，他是站在我们这边的。怎么掉吧？没有啦 ，YouTube 那边坏掉啊 ，YouTube 那个不给我改标题啊。
Argument about it.
Oh no.
I assumed that Chris approved it.
He might have. I
到
don't
最后也没同意。
Like anyway, the
对啊，这是偷偷做。
leagues is we do get to try these things for 3 or 4.
那个克里斯在讲说，我们新赛季的时候有那个背包的时候，他不会很尴尬吗？哎，这是哪时候加的？
Months. And the importance is when we do something that we are reluctant about or we are in disagreement about, is that we do reevaluate it at the end of that.
有益有救。
Are we keeping it?
因为马克来就是他做了很多优化跟赛季整合什么的，我觉得真的很重要。现在最重要的就是这个啊。
Because we have these seasonal cycles, the leagues. We do get to try these.
但 POE 最重要就是赛季整合。
something that we may be not quite comfortable with, just to really test it. And in this case.
他把技能合并，可能6分仪合并到圣甲虫。
I have to respect a firm no, but why? How come?
Well, okay, why? Not to put him. I'm sorry to put you on the spot,
Sorry.
but you know,
Okay.
I was on one half of the argument.
Hang on. So you're first of all.
Oh, no, I don't want to keep it.
First of all, Mark ultimately gets to decide this, but at the same time, my feeling on this stuff is that I don't like it when you have a build choice that results in more inventory space, because that kind of thing leads to sort of weird and.
他反对原因是
like, you know,
不喜欢玩家为了那背包去选那个生活。
It's like if I have to change my build to get more inventory space, that just doesn't feel right to me. It's a little bit hard to explain exactly why that is, but like there's various things from games like that where.
I do actually agree with that one. Having it be on a class is certainly not the right.
That was
answer.
weird.
I also just personally don't think.
迷宫附魔这蛮，我也觉得很棒啊。但是有一个人觉得不棒啊。
Pressure is good.
小诺
And I don't have a personal problem with playing with it. Obviously, it's nice to always just have more and more and more and more. But I do think that pressure is interesting, and I do think it is important to have pressure on how much you can pick up and leave a map with. Especially after Affliction, I was leaving every map with a full inventory, going like, holy, there's more things I want to take and I can't, and literally there's stacks and stacks of currency on the ground I can't pick up. But I think that is healthy and good, and it makes you make the good decisions.
I don't disagree with
要
that.
你
but
断
I
舍
don't
离
think
啊，
this
不要
was
什么都
actually
捡
about
啊，
the
是不是？
space. The reason why everyone loved the rucksack was that it was a separate space that allowed it to be much easier to manage things like your map rolling currency and your scrolls and just that random shit that fills up and clutters your inventory that you constantly have to deal with when you're shifting stuff over to back and forth your stash. There's a real problem there, a quality of life problem that the rucksack inadvertently addressed, and that's why people loved it, I think.
Fair enough. There are some. Well, at least okay. So if that is say the problem of rolling maps, for example, like there are better solutions to that, I would say, which is like.
我觉得他
Again, I hate talking about this because
你在
now
GGYD
everyone's
讲的
gonna
很
want it
好
and it, like, makes it sound like
我觉得那
it's
个小背
certainly
包
gonna
对我来
happen,
说
and
也
it
不是
isn't
说，
necessarily.
因为其实我常常也没捡嘛，我觉得最方便的是
Inventory attached to your
它
map
多一
device
个
that
小
you can
窗口在
open
旁边，
that,
我
like,
可以
contains your fragments and whatnot.
我可以放一些我固定的物品，
from the map.
这感觉差很多。
From the map, sure, but if they're just talking about like the whole bringing a bunch in to roll all your maps and like I don't know, there's more to discuss. But I saw this one on the old quality.
他想做的很好
that was there.
他想要在小背包额外一个空间里面有独立的通货可以直接使用。
either mitigate or solve that one in the future. Again, no promises, but
他想要做的是不是像那种，就是我有一个包包，然后里面可能我们可以放几个点金，对，点金钉子啊，就是洗图会用到的东西，你可以直接这样点，然后不占空间。加油，请你加油，争取。拜托了，他刚一讲还有什么打碎东西怎样，然后这个他就说应该不太行吧。
Yeah, I can see there being another solution, and I'd be fine with that because like to me it's not the fact about getting them.
对他想要
space, it's about solving that quality.
他想要一个独立的空间，就很像说最后纪元好了，那个包制作装备的包包是在额外的，就是你可以随时的用出来这样。商城通货背包，如果他出商城，我应该会买。
I'm tactically picking the ones so that we can't complete the bingo can't be completed.
Making them bingo sheets.
Not actually, but one thing that is important with a lot of these quality of life, we are actually, especially with PoE2's development, we are looking at a lot of these things which have been hard-nosed and really reevaluating, and it's like,
I think PoE2 really has
cool.
like, but just because like as well, I think as well, just like watching like new player experience videos and things like that, and just like looking at all the stuff that people are doing, and like it's kind of it's really another shot at like looking at all that really core stuff again and thinking about it. And like we just don't often think about some of that stuff very often because it's been there for so long. And then, so yeah, just having a chance to like really reevaluate everything really then starts to make you think, well, why is PoE1 even like this? You know, like, and it makes like, ends up making those changes.
Like we on Path of Exile 2, obviously you have, I maybe shouldn't spoil this, but I'm going to. We have on Path of Exile 2, we obviously have no more portal scrolls, and I'm not saying that we're doing that in PoE1 just yet. However, well, I say just yet, maybe ever, but however, in PoE1, what we are adding is, and it's come from the bingo sheet, is a bind key to
就最近讲了一个
open
嘛
a portal that you can
你
bind.
只要有放，
and
你还是要放
you
卷
don't
轴
now have to open your，
但是你可以
inventory
只按快捷键
I
开
think
门，
having- I
我觉得
think
这样
having to
很方
open your
便，
inventory
这样
during
很
a
好
boss。fight or something is not. Look, with pausing, that's kind of more acceptable because you can now pause, use the portal, and you don't risk danger. But messing around with that in the midst of
时空
combat
之
is
门
not
欸
something that you should really have to be
哎
doing.
如果
And
我有
the
装
changes
时
to
空之门，
PoE2
是不是
portals
就可以
is
直
what
接
really made us reevaluate
那还可以
that.
用
So,
吗？
yes, in 324, we'll do the classic video probably after this or next week or some.
时空之门不行，是不是一定要带传送卷轴？
There will be a bind for instantly opening.
啊，我就在想说那个有
assuming
动
you have a
作
portal scroll in your inventory.
，MP 回程。
Yeah, love to hear it. All right, that's fantastic. There's been another thing that's been mentioned a lot in chat, which is, do you have any brief comments on the state of some of the lesser used ascendancies, like Gladiator, for example? Any potential reworks or improvements coming to them?
I certainly want to. I always love doing that. And last time, obviously, with Chieftain, we missed the mark. But now during Affliction, with the league meta, obviously Chieftain grew into fit a little bit with, what, Fulcrum and whatnot. So, you know, it's kind of interesting that last live stream we discussed that one not really hitting where we want, and now it's got a lot more uses, and maybe this coming league it'll have a lot less uses. We'll see. It's quite fun how the league changes what people play. However, yes, Ascendancy class balances are nice. Effectively, we just have to, again, look at what resources we have and decide how much we can do and where we want to target it. We might, generally, we have a big discussion towards the end of each league development and think, what are we going to do next? Look at the problems, look at what we want to do. And we have a list that's bigger than we can do. And often those things are on that list and we have to weigh, like, are we going to do option A or option B? And sometimes balancing an Ascendancy class is overall less gain for the players than something else we want to do. Like, if you would rather multiple Atlas trees and or a Gladiator rebalance, I would hope to think the majority of people are going to be picking the Atlas tree feature. Maybe not everyone, but again, it's better for the mass, and thus, like, that is what we do. So, yeah, it is a
他们这种说要让侠客
issue at the end of the day. Like, you can only do so much.
他们这种说要让侠客有那个有自己的主题性之后，好像就都不怎么样哦。
It will come up in one of the things, and it is something that we will commit to.
Fantastic. All right,
晕眩专精求转就晕眩释放流没了，但是受伤释放以前的版本那些直接点燃版本什么的都是 OK 的。好啦，这个没了。好啦，已经很晚了，我也是差不多要去休息睡觉啊。那偶像低亏。好，老 P 开了。来吧，我们就你们明天中午再来看我玩吧。你先去看他们半夜要开30-40小时的，这个像纠团画面怎么没那么奇怪啊？但是这样用吗？会变怪怪的。他现在正在疯狂登录中，疯狂洗登录。滴滴滴滴滴滴滴滴。为什么要一直按啊？现在有那么急着按进去吗？他是要抢第一票是不是？啊，你们就先去看他玩吧，我休息啦，明天再说，拜拜。